Thanks, Jen. Oh, my. You're too kind. You're too gracious. Yeah, my running joke is it's always somewhat risky to give a pastor a microphone and say a few words. Hey, Foster, I did notice the giggle when John said about you so hate to talk. I did notice a rousing giggle from the crowd. They know you and love you, Foster. Grateful for who you are and what you do. And I do just want to say thank you to everyone who really makes this happen, the hands and the feet. The names, I don't want to miss anyone, so just know that I am grateful for what you've done for all these years, for all of the right reasons. And thank you for doing that. And for those of you who came here, it's not easy, especially those for the first time. You walk in perhaps a strange place with strange people, wondering, what the heck am I even doing here? I never thought I'd be here. For you to take that step from your home to this place is not lost on that. And I know that you will have a good return on the investment of the time that you decided to come here. So grateful. So just a few words is what I was told. So let me get on with those words. Let me read something to you. It says this: and not only this, but also exult in our tribulations, knowing that their tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, and proven character, hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within. So it's from Romans 5:3, a passage of scripture, and that word has been rattling around in the last couple of weeks for me, and the word is perseverance, persevere, and I've come to the conclusion that I really stink at it, and I actually tend to minimize its importance. You see, the key is in what, in a sense, persevere modifies, because what it modifies is what I want. I want to go right from the tribulation right to the hope. I want to skip the step of perseverance and character building. And I'm not even talking about hope eternal. I'm talking about hope now. And there's that value proposition that you know how much something is worth by the cost of its absence. And in the absence of perseverance, I do all kinds of things to minimize this effect of persevering, to be able to self-medicate, if you will, this absence of hope. When things are hard, I want to avoid those two things of how do I persevere, how do I build character, and out of that comes hope. And that hope, by the way, is found in Christ. But from a practical standpoint, from a day-to-day, I don't want to persevere, but you do something. So what I find out as I do is I adopt behaviors like apathy, who cares, whatever, lethargy. I minimize the effect. I don't run to the roar, as Robert Bly, a poet, would say. I just minimize it. I don't care. Much less some of the self-medicating things that I do to avoid and not recognize that I need to persevere, but it hurts too much to persevere, and I'm not getting the hope that I find, so I got to do something with that emotion. I've got to do something with this feeling. It doesn't go away. Pain must be comforted. It's just a matter of how, right? So in the absence of persevering, what I do is I self-medicate, I minimize it, I discount it. I do everything I can to not embrace it, because that seems really counterintuitive. Really counterintuitive. And all of those have a degree of, the problem is some of those things work. They work temporarily, but they do not work long-term. Therein lies the deception. Therein lies that, like, okay, I feel better. I get through a weekend, and some of those are bridges, but they are not helpful. In fact, they ultimately are harmful and never hopeful, that's for sure. So when we struggle, one of the things that to help us persevere, there's a whole bunch of things, but the time this morning, I just felt like I wanted to sort of lift up one thing, and that is, again, it seems like a somewhat of a counterintuitive, and I hope that is what this morning can do, is to be able to step back. What good people do, what achievers do, when things get hard, they run harder and they press more. And I get it. I am a son of a blue-collar family from the Midwest, so the work ethic to me is everything. And sadly, I think that work ethic has faded, but that's another topic. But all that to say, the very thing that can be your greatest asset can also be your greatest challenge. And sometimes pressing harder is like running in quicksand. The harder I work, the more I sink. So sometimes you have to step back. And what happens is when I press harder, it's like I'm running into a wall. And I'm just pressing, I'm just pushing, and I'm banging my head every single time, and I'm not that bright, and I keep running. And what I really need is a window instead of a wall. And that's sometimes what we hope, what we have to step back with. And sometimes, to sort of extend the metaphor, the wall is our expectations. The wall is the expectations, the I should have. It's supposed to be there. And this is a hard message I'm delivering. And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have expectations. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have goals. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't want better things. None of that is true. But into this life, troubles will come. And sometimes I have to step back and realign the expectations, because my expectation is like a wall. I keep hitting it. And God is saying, step back. I've got a window for you, but you're not going to see it if you keep running in this wall, Fisher. So the ability to step back, to reassess expectations, to recognize that you are more than what you have done. And that's a tough one, especially for those of you who are workers who care and rightly care. See, that's the point, is that a lot of the things you're doing, they seem right and they seem logical. And we wouldn't want to counsel them out of you, so to speak. But we have to look at our life with wisdom. We have to be able to step back. Is it time for me to realign an expectation? And that's not easy. But is God opening a window and you're still trying to expect a wall? That's why coming to these places, to hear different things, to see different things, to talk to different people is so vital and important. Most of you I know spend a whole lot of time in front of that one-eyed monster, that computer. And that can be a dark and dangerous place. Also a very hopeful and encouraging place. I get it. But to be able to step back, to hear, to see, to listen, to open yourself up is really, really important. Because sometimes the more I cling to something, the more powerful that thing becomes. And it takes more power than my essential worth. It is not because of what I've done, but because of, I believe, what God has given. I don't know where you are, faithful, and I'm not here to convert that. I'm just telling you my story. And the worth has become understandable only after I've run into a whole bunch of walls and some people have helped me pull back and say, you're bigger than that. It's hard, but that's part of the only way that you hold on to something. Because it just feels like your worth is been challenged. And I'm here to tell you, it hasn't. It hasn't. But it may need to be reevaluated. But the essential core worth is because you have been given life and dignity and agency. And I hope you hold on to that. I hope you find that. I want to tell you one little story that, and then I'll take my time away. Some of you may have heard this. It's true. Always helps when a pastor speaks truth, right? Why not? And if you've heard it, I hope you hear it anew. But there used to be the most expensive coffee was a coffee called Kape Lua. The coffee was harvested in Indonesia. What makes this coffee so priceless is the way that it is harvested. You see, what happens is there's a cat in Indonesia called the civet cat. And the civet cat eats the coffee berries, and then there's something in the digestive enzymes that convert the bean into a incredibly rich, I've never had it, incredibly rich, and what I'm told, exotic and obviously valued taste. But you're wondering, how does the bean get harvested? Yeah, I don't know about that job. I don't know if you got that one, Foster. But it is collected from the scat and then cleaned up and harvested. The point of that true story is that I believe, and here's where you get a little insight into my character, that in the pile of stuff that you feel like your life is, I believe God can reach down and he can grab you and he can hold you and he can make you worth incredible value, incredible worth that is desired and wanted by others, much less yourself. It starts out one way, goes through a nasty process, and ends up another way. Perhaps that is where you are now. Father God, thank you for these people. Thank you for the courage that they have walking into this room. As I said, I don't know where they are in their relationship with you, but that's okay, because truth is truth is truth. And Lord, I trust that your truth is the truth. Lord, whatever I've said today, if it doesn't make sense, don't let them remember it, but let them hold on to whatever it is they need to hear out of the few words that I spoke. Lord, this morning, wisdom will be spoken, encouragement will be given. May they be receptive to that. May your Holy Spirit move in this place to do only what you could do. We never want to be so smart that we're in front of you. We never want to be lazy enough to be behind you. Lord, help us be right where you are and simply let us join the work that you're doing in their lives. Lord, may all who speak today be held and led by your presence. It is in your mighty name I pray. Amen. Thanks, guys, for letting me come in and chat just a few minutes. Appreciate it.
So good morning. I feel like whoever's in the room is supposed to be in the room because we've had trees down. We've had major power outages in Carrollton as I drove through, and police cars and everything else. Can I get a show of the rooms? How many are new to this meeting and how many have never been here before? Okay, that's great. Boy, these lights are like really bright. I'm like, how? Okay, I got it. Just call it out. What brought you in here today? What were you looking for? What was it in the content, or maybe you're just in search, you just stumbled in and the coffee's good. I don't know, but what brought you in? Networking, great. People, okay, great. Okay. I didn't hear it. Okay, to learn. Yeah, so on that thread, what was it that is in your mind in the job search? What's like keeping you awake at night? What's worrying you? I know, bills. I know. Okay, we'll definitely cover that. Oh, okay, so just a check on, am I doing the process? Is there anything I'm missing there? Great. Anything else? Am I choosing the right path? Okay. I think the why is taking so long will definitely be answered here. I was joking with somebody yesterday, and I said, maybe I should have been an economist, because whenever people hear me speak, it's very much like an economist. And then I read an article that was from an economist, and that's exactly what I tell people with what was in that article. So my name is Elizabeth Lyons. I've been kicking around a long time. I am a career coach. I've been doing that for well over 20 years. I still am in the game. I think that's what makes me relevant and a little different than other career coaches, in that I still hire and talk to executives every single day. I still make choices around candidate slates and give feedback and counsel hiring managers around the law and maybe what they're looking for and what candidate might fit better versus another. But the beauty of that is I get this real-time feedback from the hiring managers why you weren't selected or why you were selected. I also get the phone call first before you're laid off. I get the phone call before somebody goes on maternity leave and decides not to come back. I get the phone call before the layoff happens or you're fired, frankly. So I sit on all that information, and many years ago I realized it was a little bit imbalanced, because if you're having the experience, you don't know why you're having the experience. Like, why is it taking so long, right? So part of my endeavor was really just helping to bridge that gap in between the employer and the job seeker. And I've done it for, we're going on nearly three recessions here. I've done it a long time. So today we're going to talk about the 3 elements in the job search in 2025. I do want to touch a little bit on AI and its impact in recruiting, because there's some false knowledge out there about what's going on in AI and how it can impact you in the search. I want to really touch on as well how to talk about AI in the interviews and how you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to bring up AI and learn a little bit in your search while you have some time to make you competitive in the market. And we're going to talk about the ATS and how to get hired by networking. That was mentioned earlier. I'm here to network, which I think is a brilliant way to go with this. And then I've got some final tips and takeaways for all of you this morning. So my name's Elizabeth Lyons. I am the author of 3 books. The first one is called Recession Proof Yourself, where I wrote it and launched it in the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. Who remembers those days? Tough, man, very tough. Losing our houses, losing our jobs, very rough in other parts of the market other than Texas. My understanding was Texas wasn't impacted as greatly as other parts of the country. The second book that I wrote is called I Quit Working for You Isn't Working for Me. And going back to the thought around process, it definitely talks about the process and how to go about it in a way that's very simple and very clear, so that you're able to stay on track and keep tracking your job search so that you know you're going the right direction. This is kind of an embarrassing story to tell, but I'll tell it. I found myself in job search a couple of years ago, and I started to pick up all the ideas that all of you have, which is like, is something wrong with me? And maybe I'm too old, and maybe I need more skills, and what if it never happens for me again? And what if I was somebody for 25 years and now I'm nobody and it's all over for me? And all of that negative self-talk that I've been coaching for all those years with executives and people in search actually were starting to play through in my own mind, and doubting myself and the whole process. And one morning, God bless my husband, Steve, he came to me and said, he was very irritated with me, and he said, why don't you go read your own book? And that was a little bit shocking, and it felt like cold water being thrown on me. And I looked at him and I said, okay, I think I'll go do that. And at 5 a.m, very quietly, I went in my office and I closed my door and I read my own book. And what it did was it put me back in a process. And I was like, oh, I know how to do this. I just do A, B, C, and D over and over and over again, and hold the good thought and do the activity, and eventually it'll come. And that's exactly what happened. I ended up with offers from some pretty stellar companies, and I was able to choose the one that worked for me. So I Quit Working for You Isn't Working for Me. It's a couple years old, but the nuts and bolts of it would still be very effective. And then the third book is called Hear Us for Our Unapologetic Women Leading in Corporate America. And I thought I wrote a book about women's leadership, and it ended up I wrote a book about leadership in all kinds of male executives, and everybody of every size, race, color, age has read it and recommended it. So it's really a book about unity, truly. So I'm going to just run right into this here and start going right with the number one thing I want to share with you. The world has changed now in a good way. I know we had the executive orders with DEI and it being quotation canceled, and if you actually read the executive order, it's not as scary as one may lead you to believe. I would highly encourage people to step away from the news, whether it's red or blue or purple news or whatever news you think you're reading, and actually go into the White House and into the actual executive orders and read them. If you read them, you may find that they are not so scary. And what I would say with anything, and the biggest thing I learned, was to go right back down to root cause analysis. I thought that I was getting good information from both sides and able to make good decisions. And what I found was I didn't know anything until I read all the executive orders. And that plays very deeply into job search and what you're experiencing right now. So I really want to emphasize that in terms of where we're all going as a nation, in corporate America, in job search, in the economy, in unemployment, in tariffs, I can go on and on. Take a little time and read a couple of the executive orders that maybe you think impact you. Like for me, it was DEI. I wanted to read about that. There was a few others that caught my attention in the headline of the executive order. Read them and see what they have to say. And read it with an open mind. Read it with an open mind. When they eliminated, if you will, DEI, it actually leveled the playing field again in towards this skill-based hiring, which is where we're going, which you've seen it, you just don't know you've seen it. So in 2020, when we had the pandemic, one of the things corporate America did was they stripped out qualifications, hardcore qualifications around education in every job posting. And if we read job postings now, it doesn't say required, a bachelor's degree, or blah, blah, blah. And we started to move this direction of skill-based hiring. DEI actually helped a great deal because it brought awareness to beautiful things like diverse slates and diverse candidate pools and, frankly, diverse panel interviews so that if you walk in, the panel that you're interviewing with is also diverse and the slate is diverse. This is also, it's actually a very positive thing. It's going to actually level all the playing field. So it's not about diversity anymore. It's about skills. So here's the other thing. If you've been around the block a while, you think your 25 years or 30 years of doing XYZ should have this big value. And the problem is they're not going to look at that anymore. So you want to reframe how you're positioning yourself and how you're marketing yourself. So when I talk about skills-based, you're also going to see that the interviews are actually going to change greatly from now until the next year or two, because they're going to be skills-based interviews. They're not going to be, tell me about a time when you didn't get along with everybody in the office and how did you handle it. They're throwing all that out. It's not going to matter how long you've done something. It's going to matter. What's going to matter and what's going to get weighed is how current are you? Did you take any classes with a certification? If you're in cybersecurity, did you take some boot camps? Did you get some certifications? If you're in IT, all those certifications weigh heavily right now. You could have some good time in the job, but that certification will actually tip the scales and get you hired, as opposed to having, 10 or 5 or 7 years in cybersecurity. So that when I talk about skills-based, that's what it is. So time in the saddle isn't going to be it anymore. It's going to be the skills-based hiring. Your resumes need to reflect your skills. They do need to reflect your tenure in a company, absolutely. But you really want to have that skills section at the top of the resume. This is also very important. This is the biggest disconnect I see with people not getting hired. And it's the simplest thing, but for whatever reason, we overthink it and we can't do it. When you look at the ad, it will say, so many years, qualifications, X number of years in IT, 3+ years in people management or people leadership. Then that's all it'll say, like maybe 2 or 3 bullets, which frankly, everybody in the room could probably check the box on. Then you get into the desired skills. Now we're getting into hardcore IT skill sets or very specific skill sets to your industry or to your skill. That's what they really want. That's what they really want. So make sure that that's on your resume in a very clear manner at the very top of the resume and pepper it through the resume. And that's the biggest disconnect everybody makes. I will share with you this. From a recruiting perspective, it's a nightmare because you're one of 100 or 200 in the candidate pool because people have shotgunned their resumes everywhere. There's also, I found out at Jeff Morris's group, that there are tools, there are platforms and tools where they'll come to you and say, hey, your resume didn't quite make it. For $1.95, we can redo your resume and resubmit it. Do you want us to do that? And so what they do is then they'll take that information, they shotgun it. So when I get up and I look at my candidate pool, it looks like 2008, but the difference is 90% of it isn't qualified and it's all crap. So I got to sit and read through that for 2.5 hours to find the 5 candidates that I'm going to call, the 3 that'll get to interview with me, and they'll go to the hiring manager and one will get picked. So you're competing with like massive amounts of numbers. A friend of mine in the office, she had a Java position open, and I just shook my head. I said, oh my God, did your ad blow up? She said, 600 people in 5 days. All of them had visa issues, can't hire any of them. So please don't shotgun. You're not going to get there anyway. I'm just going to decline you. We're all going to decline you. So why don't you slow down and look at the ad and think about what you have to offer that employer and present that. Rather than filling out 25 applications, why don't you do 5 really well? And when you do them really well, have the intention that this is a part of the process, that this too shall pass, and that you'll find a job. That's very important. What you think about right now, how long is it taking? That's going to impact your search. Here's the other thing that's changing. RTO. So JP Morgan is back in the office 5 days. Amazon went back 5 days. The other banks are looking at the other banks, figuring out if they want to go back 5 days or keep it 3 days, but have a minimum of what they're going to be in the office, how many hours they're going to be in. AT&T went back to the office 5 days. I mean, we're really starting to move that direction slowly. And then what's mirroring out here is the administration. So when the administration has changed and they've come in and they've told everybody that are government employees, you have to be in the office. Remember that. And then there was an email sent. Remember that. And then what I dropped off was 65,000 people took the buyout package and said, that's, I'll just get out of my job, just pay me out now. That going on is going to highly impact and reflect corporate America and business in general. Because whether you agree with it or not, the overall looming sense, frankly, is this. Americans have gotten a little slack, gotten a little lazy. We did this work from home. There weren't people really working from home. There were people working 2 jobs. They were getting paid a lot of money. So here's what really happened, which is what The Economist talked about in The Atlantic yesterday in an article called "The Job Market is Frozen." It is the identical story that I tell everybody, which is really funny to see an economist tell the same story I did because I'm not an economist. So in 2020, we had the pandemic. Do you remember that? We all locked down and you couldn't talk to anybody and we were all scared we were all going to die. Right, so we all locked down and then the craziest thing happened was the restaurants started to fall, but the people with the skills and the computers, they all kept their jobs. Even though they sat and did no work, they kept their jobs. We still don't know why. And then like a year later, it became like all this business came in and things were moving. And then it was like we have to hire all these people. And then what we found was we didn't have the talent pool to hire all the people. And so what happens in supply and demand, whether it's oil and gas or cereal, frankly, or talent, you pay more money for that, whatever it is, because the demand is very low. So we all overpaid. Then the feds get in there and they're jacking with the rates. They're really jacking with the rates. They jacked with the rates so many times, we can't even read or understand the models anymore. They don't understand the models anymore. People have been in the market for 50 years. They would be able to read a model and be like, okay, recession will hit here, or the stock market, we can't read them anymore because of the algorithms and the rates and trying to prop up the economy and all this stuff. Do you remember all that? So then what happened was employers hired all those people and we paid a lot of money. And then the inflation went up. And so my heat bill went up, your heat bill went up. Well, so did corporate America's. It cost them a lot of money to run the heat and do everything else, just like us in our houses. So when we were making more money and we did a job jump and we made between 30 and 70% more during the pandemic, all the prices went up and so it kind of leveled out. And about a year and a half ago, corporate America said, something's not right. I hired a business analyst 5 years ago, and that business analyst 5 years ago was $90,000. And now today, that same business analyst wants $130,000. Well, I know it's not $90,000, but it ain't 130 either, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm paying for. I don't really know what the skill even is anymore. And then we had what was called the big stay. And you had no turnover. And everybody sat their butts down and barely made meets on their performance reviews because remember, we promoted them and hired them in and paid them more, and they went over their head. They're not even performing, and everybody sat down. And so there's no movement. Why is it taking so long? There's no movement. There's no flow. People aren't organically leaving jobs, and people aren't doing this and that. So what they did, which they didn't tell you, which I'm going to tell you this morning, is something called forced attrition. Have you heard of that? Okay, so here's what it sounds like. Everybody in the office right now, we don't care, everybody in the office right now, 3 days a week. You go in 3 days a week. Then they say, oh, you know what? Bob, you don't live close enough to the office. You need to live within 50 miles of the office. And Bob's like, I live 60 miles and I'm here 3 days a week. What's the problem? They're like, well, it's not working for us. You need to relocate. And you know what? To make it easier for you to relocate, we're going to give you $5,000. And Bob's like, I'm not pulling my kids out of school and selling my house for $5,000 to come 10 miles closer to commute. And so it's called forced attrition. The next thing they do is they say, everybody that works in the company, if you're a lateral, you want to make a lateral move inside the company, a P5 to a P5, a lateral move, no increase. Okay, that was a big pill to swallow. But then the pill got even bigger. And what they said was, you that want the promotion from individual contributor into leadership, no money. No increase. And everybody's mad, and they're like, leave. We don't care, leave. We need them to leave. We're trying to stimulate the market because of the state that we're in. So why is it taking so long? Because nothing comes from nowhere. And that's what we're living in now. And then when you apply, there's 200 people in the spread, and somebody like me sits for 2 hours and goes decline, 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 decline. Or the resume is not clearly matching the job because you're panicked and you're just sending out applications. That's what's going on. So hybrid working is a whole other thing now. We're probably going to end up going back in, I would say 4 to 5 days a week. I don't see that changing, especially with the message with the administration in terms of government, because corporate America is going to mirror just that. They're also going to look at, during that time, they're still going to look at performance. There's going to be heavy emphasis on performance. We saw that, didn't we see that the last two months, What was the last statement? Give me 5 bullet points of what you did last week. I couldn't help laughing because from my perspective, but that's the reality. What are we doing? So you're definitely going to feel pressure if you're working or if you're not. You're going to feel that pressure in the interviews as well. Okay, so that's 1 and 2 of what's different this year, 2025. Number 3, I really want to touch upon because I think this is probably one of the most important. So AI and hiring. So I took a class 2 months ago in LinkedIn, and it was all about their tool, LinkedIn Recruiter, and how it works. And it is terrible because I'll never find all y'all because of the algorithm. I'll never find you. I'll never find the people in my own darn network that are attached to me with how they got it going. They put in machine learning in there, and if you put into the search, it boils it down to like 2,000 candidates. Do you think I'm going to go through 2,000 candidates? I just tried to go through 200 in the ad response for 2.5. Right? I got 25 recs at the executive level. I don't have time. Nobody's doing this. So you get it down from 2,000 to maybe 500. But it's still, you can't get it really, really close. It is machine learning, and there is some cool parts in there about, if you like Jacob's profile, let me show you a profile like Jacob. So it starts to do that. Well, do you like a little more of this or a little more of that? It pops up these questions, and the whole point is that you can narrow it, but you can't really narrow it because there are bazillion people on LinkedIn. So when you think about AI, it's only as good as the data. There's no reason to get mad at ChatGPT or Grok or any of them if they're giving you false information. All they have to go on is the original data. And so AI, in terms of the job search, the only place it is right now, honest to God, it is not in Workday, which is 95 to 98% of your applications go into Workday. Workday is the tool where your application would float through. It's not in there. So anybody that stands on this stage in this meeting or anybody else that says there's some bot that's picking your resume over your resume over your resume, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's not embedded in the tool. And here's another big clarification. I have a whole other talk on this because I literally took conservatively 15 hours of AI and machine learning classes. Literally. I took all that to understand it, to understand what I'm doing. Machine learning is different than AI. AI is automation. Now, there might be automated processes within HR and within recruiting. And what you're going to experience is chatbots. That's automation. That's not machine learning and an algorithm thrown in there that says your resume comes before your resume comes before your resume. That's not happening. It can't happen legally. It won't happen right now because the algorithms are so wonky. And the algorithms will be biased. And the algorithms will actually segment out diverse groups, which is what happened to Amazon. And so they killed theirs. So all this fear about, oh my God, machines are going to take over and it's going to be terrible and now I'm impacted and all that. Like, I really want you to get that out of your head because one, it's the biggest lie walking. And two, it's the worst thing going on in your mind in the job search. You don't want that in your mind in the job search. You want possibilities, you want opening, you want acceptance, you want possibility, you want connectiveness. You don't want a bunch more fear along with, I gotta pay the bills, right? So I'm here to tell you the absolute truth. There's no bot out there choosing one over the other. What you will see is lots of chatbots in the hiring process. That's automation. A person reads your resume, a real person reads it, like me, and we were going through 200 because everybody's applying to everything because they're panicked. You might see it in reporting. This slide was written 2 months ago. I would actually remove out DEI reporting because we're not reporting on that anymore. No large bank, no large company, they have come out very publicly in the press the last probably 6 weeks. They're pulling out their DI. So what does that mean? They actually have places within Workday when you fill out your application, think about it on the back end, and then they have all this disclosure like, are you a veteran? Are you a protected class? Are you disabled? Are you, like it just goes, it really goes into some minutia, actually into like mental illness kinds of things. When you fill all that out, Workday can see that and separate out. And so somebody like me goes in and can click a button and say, the slate is so far diverse. You know, of 100 candidates, it's, 70% diverse. It won't break down that diversity for me in terms of Asian, female, that it won't do that for me. But what it's doing is it wants to know that the slate of candidates is diverse first, and then it wants to know if my panel is diverse. All of that is taken right out of Workday right now. No one is measuring that or looking at that because of the executive order around DEI. So this is the part where you start to think about pivot. You going back to process. What could I do different? What might I be able to try something new, better, faster to give me that edge to get me hired? I would really consider befriending AI, understanding the difference between AI, machine learning, understanding what the algorithms are, just general basic understanding. I would highly recommend classes on LinkedIn Learning. I would highly recommend classes by Doug Rose. So here's what happened to me. I had a lot of time on my hand fourth quarter when all the recs froze. So I took every class I could within my organization. And then I did all of them. And then I went out to LinkedIn Learning. And that was interesting because that wasn't boiled down information. That was the real information. And the reason I did it was I thought if I can understand AI and I can understand machine learning and I can understand the algorithms just at a high level, like at a C-level understanding, I hire cybersecurity executives. If I was a CISO, I am not an algorithm person. I am not a data lake person. I'm not that person, right? But I have to understand it enough and understand automation enough to understand what I can safely automate or not automate within cyber. I wanted to literally read what the CISOs read, literally. And I went right out and I found those classes and I took all of those. And I would highly recommend do it because the first thing it did was it gave me confidence that I could actually hold a conversation at a networking meeting about it. Because we hear this AI thing, but we think it's everything, and it's not. And the second thing was, I was frankly concerned about my own job. Like, where was it going? And would there be a day where I would wake up and they would say, "Good morning, Elizabeth. Here's the 10 people you're going to call today," because I don't like that. I like to control my own destiny. And I wondered if that was going to happen to me. I didn't think my job would be completely automated, but where are we going in my own job? And I had my own fear around it. And taking those 15, it was probably more like 20 hours of classes, it gave me the confidence to speak articulately. All that fear went away from me. But the bigger thing is that I can talk about it to some extent and share it with you. And I would say in your interviews, the thing that's going to distinguish you from you in an interview is, frankly, bring it up in an interview. Ask them, what's your roadmap for AI? And are you doing automation? Are you doing more machine learning? Ask them, in this job where I'm at, what's the vision for it? How does my role, if I took this role, how would I use that within AI? What is your organization doing? How can I help you with this? They're going to need more leaders and managers to orchestrate all this before it's all said and done, and it's going to take a lot more years than what they're telling us. It's already a lot of places, but it's still they can't do it because of the algorithms. I learned all I learned, and then I do what I do, and I go and I talk to people. And I talk to some very high-level senior vice presidents that have been in this data space for 20 and 30 years, and I was like, this is what I know, what do you think? First of all, do I have it? They're like, you have it. I'm like, okay, now I do understand it. They're like, you do understand it at a basic level. I'm like, so where does this go? They're like, we can't do the algorithms. You can't tweak them enough. He's like, a great example is a self-driving car that just goes around and around and around, right? And the self-driving car and the algorithm literally is, something's in the road, it's a dog, it's a person, or the driver goes off the cliff, and the algorithm was like, what do you want us to do? We can't do that. United Healthcare is having a massive lawsuit along with Humana because they put in machine learning in their claims. And thousands of people were perished and denied. Right now. What dum-dum puts ML in there and doesn't check it? What dum-dum? I'm not even that bright, and I would be like, hey, is the machine working? I mean, I would do that, right? That's a story you're hearing, but what if it was your grandmother? What if it was your mother? What was your father? What if it was you? And they kicked you out of the hospital and told you and the cancer is okay. Oh, now all of a sudden it's getting real, right? Because if it's you, now we're all paying attention. You want to have awareness about this stuff. You want to have awareness about the companies you're going to go into and work for. You want to understand their ethics. You want to understand, can you get behind it? I turned down a very fine job offer from a very large pharmaceutical company because I can't be a part of what they did with the drugs that they sold and the people and the pharmaceuticals and what they did. I couldn't work for McKesson. I couldn't do it. Because at the end of the day, my ethics drove me. And I knew everybody there, and they were a great team, and I loved them. I mean, I could have easily gone in and done it. My integrity was like, I can't be a part of that larger thing because now I've sold my talent into this bigger thing. So you want to know what they're doing with AI. You want to know what their ethics are. You want to know. Ask them questions. See how you can help. You're not going to be able to hold those conversations unless you take some classes around the AI and the machine learning, so definitely do that. I just want to read my notes here on this one slide. So the big things that, I think I've touched on this enough, but you want to be able to explain what exactly AI is versus machine learning. And you want to see where they're going with it and see how you can help, and also think about how is this going to impact you. I'll give you a great example about how it's going to impact you. I got a call yesterday, a lovely woman out in California that was a film producer. And she said, I'm 42, 43, I'm going to need to pivot. I don't feel like I can probably be producing films much longer because AI and the way this whole market's going and all of it. And I told her, I think you're very wise. So she's already looking at her industry, which is going to be impacted dearly, and looking at her age and thinking, how do I pivot out of a creative job and find something that's fulfilling and is also going to pay me money that I can move into, even part-time and then full-time, whatever that is. And we talked about options for her. And so that's what you want to think about too. As you're doing these job interviews, where is that job going to go in time? What's going to get phased out? So in terms of getting hired faster, this is the number one thing that I personally found working with clients a year ago. It's just a year ago, March, that I saw it. The executives that came to me that went through my job search program and worked with me in coaching, the one thing that they did that was different than everybody else was they had a very robust networking plan, very robust. So I think there's a big disconnect in what we think networking is now. And I think that when we network, it can be a little bit needy. When you network, there's all this like, I got to pay the bills and I got to make an impression and who does this person know and how are they going to help me? And it's very I, me, mine, as opposed to openness and I have a network as well and what can I share and what can I give and what can I bring? And it's what I found also was that intention, their actual intention as they were networking and how clean it was made a difference in terms of them getting that lead into the company. So here's what networking isn't, because there's this huge, and Foster and I talked about this briefly, here's this huge idea that networking is just connecting with somebody on LinkedIn and shooting them a note. And now you're connected, and so now you've got some like carte blanche, I guess, to go back to them because you realize they work for Toyota or their spouse does, and then you can maybe get that lead into Toyota. That's not networking. That's not networking. Networking is looking for opportunities. Years ago, they told you networking was trying to get into a company. That's not your problem anymore. You know what your problem is? Your problem is you're one of 200 in the applicant spread, and I don't know you're there. So logically, what would be your question then if you're networking? Your question would be, hey, do you know anybody at Toyota? Yeah, in fact, I do. Would you look up the rec number and find the recruiter? Would you just ask the recruiter to review my resume? I didn't ask for the job. I didn't ask for the interview. I didn't ask for anything. I asked you to take 30 seconds and look at my resume and tell me if I'm viable or not. And I literally found people got interviews within 24 hours or declines. But we got them visibility out of the 200 that's sitting in the pool. And at the end of the day, that's all you want. You just want to know, like, if I applied to 20 things, the dead air silence is what keeps you up at night, and it just grates on you. And it feels like this pointless exercise. And so we just keep doing the pointless exercise even more crappy. We just send it out, send it out, send it out. What you want is visibility. Crystal clear. It's that simple. We make it so hard. It's not hard. What you want is somebody to actually read that resume and say, yep, that's it. You didn't ask to go to the hiring manager. You remember the games of 15 years ago? You were always trying to just get around the recruiter and get to the hiring manager. That's over. That's not the game anymore. The game is, would you just read it and tell me if I'm viable? That's the game. And those executives that did that and worked with me, they got calls to interview or they got declined. Period, end of story. And the ones that went to interview, we polished them up in the interview and they went to offer. It's that simple. So networking, I think thinking about what networking means to you and reframing that in a way is really important. I want you to think about, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you doing it? If you're networking, what does that mean? I've had people go out networking and never ask for the whatever it is that they need. Like, they have a lot of nice conversations and they feel good, but there's no substance to it. And I'm like, why didn't you ask them that? Oh, I didn't think, can I ask them that? Absolutely, ask them that. You know, most people, if you go to them and say, would you get a hold of the recruiter, ask them to read my resume, they'll do that. That's actually not a big deal at all. I do it. It's not a big deal at all. So think about that networking piece and what does that mean? And when we have this network, how are we organizing it? So the clients that I worked with, it was a very robust plan. It was all pulled together in one area with a list and a plan of activities that had to be done daily, weekly, monthly, right down to, what do I say? I got to call John. I haven't talked to him in 5.5 years. What do I say? And the executives that did that with me, they were the ones that got phone calls and eventually got interviews and got offers. It's really important around that network. But the purity of intention around that is important too, right? So if we're networking, the grasping energy and the needy energy and the desperation energy, we want to try to keep that at a low down here, and we want to think about what we can give. Because I'll tell you something else. If you think that you have no value and you're just out there networking, trying to collect cards or collect handshakes or likes or whatever you're doing, it's not going to be substantive because you've got this false impression of who you think you really are. And we started this whole thing, we talked about perseverance. And I thought that was really key around perseverance. But I think the quality around the perseverance is important too. We can do the activity, but to really slow down and evaluate that activity on Friday morning. I take out my spreadsheet. How many places did I talk to? How many places did I call? How many interviews did I get? How many applications went out? And really self-evaluate that activity on Friday morning. How did I do? Could I do better? And tweak it. You don't want to do big tweaks though. Like you don't want to rewrite your entire resume, unless there's something really wrong there. You want to stay the course, but small things and being honest, I put out all these applications. I never did find a contact at Toyota. Maybe when I'm out next week, I can look for that, or I can at least ask them when I'm networking, hey, do you know anybody there? I'd love to work there. There was a pretty cool job there. And then the last piece I would say is, we don't know anything. And that's really hard on the ego. You don't know that job at Toyota is your job. You think it's your job, but you don't know everything. And so you're better to just go into process mode and not into attachment mode. Because what happens in attachment mode is we ride it up, down, up, down. Oh, I got the call. Now they rejected me. Oh, I got the interview. I haven't heard from them in 3 weeks. Oh, I had a networking event. Now I'm not down in the dumps. I talked to 10 people. I got some consolation out of it. I feel better about myself. That up, down, up, down, up, down is the worst in the job search. And it is the biggest impediment to your success in finding the job. You want to stay as stable as you can mentally and emotionally. So no matter what presents, you're okay with it. You accept it. Okay, they didn't call back. Is there anything I can do to get them to call back? Maybe I'll send a note. Okay, they still didn't call back. Okay, is there anything else I can do? You're always thinking about that, but you're not riding these emotional ups and downs, you're like yo-yos out there. Who would want to hire a yo-yo? I don't want to hire a yo-yo. If that behavior starts to come out in the interview, I cut you loose. You don't even know it. You won't even feel it. It's just instant. It's I'm done. I don't want to hire that. The behavior's got to be, the energy's got to be kind of neutral. So if you're bouncing around inside, how can you ever expect a positive result? You've got to be accountable. You've got to be accountable for what's going on in your mind and the job search. And at least work on that. At least look at that. You've got process, right? You've got, I got to fill applications. I have to go to so many meetings. You have process, but then you've got some self-work to do. Who would want to hire me and why? What do I have to give? What do I have to give is very differently than I need the job. What I have to give is very different than I got to pay my bills. What can I offer? They smell that like dogs, I'm telling you. And the high-level executives, I know it's a beatdown. If you've been in search 6 months, 9 months, a year, I get that. But you know what's beautiful about you? You've always had an edge. You've always had the ability to persevere. And when the going got tough and the wind went right in your face, you ducked and you went right into the wind. And that is what made you an executive. That is what made you the top 5% of our country, sitting in those roles, director level and above, in the large companies. And so what happens is you fall out of a job and you fall out of $250 on the base, plus your $30,000 bonus, and then you think you're no longer. And that's not true. That is not true. That is just a bunch of garbage that you say in your head to yourself. And I love working with those guys and gals because I'm the first one to be pulling those wires out of their head and plugging in some good stuff, because it's not like you're not, which brings me to my last point. Here's an eye-opener. You are not your job. You are not your job. You are not your title. You are not your money. You are not your mortgage. You are not the Lexus and the payment out in the parking lot. Because if you were those things, guess what? I got 150 people in this room right now. That would mean that you're not, which is what's so devastating in search. So what causes the pain in the search? The pain is the identification with the job and the money. And then we get desperate and we grasp. And that becomes the obstacle. Ourselves becomes the obstacle. So there's process, and then there's what's going on in my mind. What's going on in my mind? Don't you dare believe you worked for 25 years and did a great job and, won all the awards and made all this money. Now all of a sudden you're not. It wasn't like, God came down and said, okay, now I'm taking you out. You've been a bad boy, I'm taking you out, it's over. No, go back as an executive to the beauty of the animal that you are, which is perseverance, which is grit, which is intelligence, which is low emotion, high decision. Don't forget who you are, who the core of who you are is. Because the job's gonna go, the body's gonna go, everything's gonna go eventually. Eventually, at the very end, you're not even thinking about work. You think you're laying on your deathbed thinking about work? You're not thinking about work. You're not. Right now, it's all-consuming. And what I'm saying is that all-consuming can be the obstacle. And to mind your mind and to be gentle with yourself. Don't beat yourself up too much. Be gentle with yourself. And lastly, on your family. Your families are going to ask you, did you get the job? You know how they do that? You come home, for a day like today, you get home around noon or whatever. Yeah, did you get the job? Did you get the interview? And that's stressful. And so what I would say is, keep it to yourself as best you can. Understand who your support group is during that search. Understand who that is. And say really positive things like, it's going great. I'm working with a coach now. She says I'm doing great. I tell my clients to say that all the time. I'm like, when you go home, just, tell your wife or tell your husband, everything's great, that you've got it under control, that you and I are working together, that we have a plan, and none of this is a lie, but don't get into any more details. Because now we've got that fear monger feeding your fear monger, and now we've just got a big mess in the house. We don't want that. You're capable, you're able, you can do this. Understand who your support systems are during this time. I think that's important as well. This last slide is just some great reads, and of course we'll share the deck with all of you. Hybrid, key hiring trends on 2025 on LinkedIn. The tech forecast. There's some good stuff here that I left behind for you. And then this was the Q&A portion. Just quick note, you're more than welcome to go to my site at lyonsology.com. You'll see the book, I Quit Working For You Isn't Working For Me. If you want me to look at your resume, in any of these groups, I always offer a 15-minute consultation if you want me to look at your resume, if you want to come to me. A lot of people come to me, they're like, it's a big mess. And I'm like, usually it's not, honestly. And I'm like, you don't need my services and it's not a big mess. Do these 3 things and you're going to be okay. Call me in a month. But I'm more than welcome to give my time to any of these groups. And I've been around Foster so many years, and I really believe in this group. And I love that it's in a church. I love everything about this. So if you want the assistance, go to Lyonsology. You can connect with me through there or through LinkedIn. We'll set a time early next week and jump on a call.